Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. I do have one quick favor before we get to the video that you came here for, and that is very simply this. You see that little red subscribe button below this video? Go ahead, smash that subscribe button. It really does help me. It really does help this channel grow and my audience grow. So go ahead and hit that red subscribe button. And now, here is the video that you came here for. And so, as I said, I do believe that number of teams that can actually win it all is probably smaller than most people think because, again, you got to get there, then you got to beat two really good teams. You got to beat Alabama and Ohio State back-to-back, Ohio State and Georgia, Georgia and Clemson, Clemson and Alabama, whoever it is. So who are those five teams that are actually suited to win it all? Let's get to my five teams that I believe can win it all, and let's start with number one. I don't think it's going to be very much of a surprise. But it is the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I've talked so much about Alabama this fall into the lead up to the season. I guess it's the summer in the lead up to the fall. I'm not going to go through position by position, player for player, why I love Alabama. But what I would say is not only is Alabama always a contender in this conversation, always on the short list, 1, 2, in a worst case scenario, maybe 3. But as I've said many times, 1, they got a ton of returning talent. And 2, they are genuinely returning with a chip on their shoulder where they were really right in the thick of things to win a national championship during what Nick Saban called a rebuilding year and what I agree was a rebuilding year for Alabama. So Alabama's always good. Now they have a chip on their shoulder, and I just think it is go time in Tuscaloosa. Now, why do I like Alabama so much? Again, I've told you so much about them. You've heard about them on every college football radio show, podcast, TV show that you watch. This team's just loaded. I think offensively, they were really good last year. I mean, Bryce Young won the freaking Heisman Trophy, for Pete's sakes. And I think they have a chance to be better than they were a year ago. Again, it goes back to what Nick Saban said. They were not, they had real question marks at various points last year. I talked about it on this show. I said it wasn't a vintage Alabama team. They were really close. Well, look at who they bring back on offense. Obviously, you don't need me to tell you Bryce Young, reigning Heisman Trophy winner, 47 touchdown passes and 7 interceptions. Oh, by the way, more than a quarter of those interceptions came in the national championship game against Georgia. So you're talking about through the first, whatever it would be, 14 starts of his career, this guy, 46 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, very deserving of the Heisman Trophy. But what would scare me about Alabama is this. I think you can legitimately argue the offense has a chance to be better and more balanced than it was last year. Last year, you kind of had a straight-ahead runner at running back named Brian Robinson. Great 4-year player. It's no disrespect to him. But now you add Jahmyr Gibbs, the transfer from Georgia Tech. I've talked a ton about him. Super dynamic, can catch the ball out of the backfield, can run between the tackles 5 yards per carry without nearly the offensive line, nearly the weapons that he will have at Alabama. This kid is, I don't think he's a dark horse Heisman contender, but I have seen some make the argument. On top of that, listen, there's no replacing Jamison Williams, first-round pick, probably would have been the number 1 wide receiver off the board if he hadn't gotten hurt in the title game. But Jermaine Burton, transfer from Georgia, I've said it many times. Mel Kiper has him listed as a first-round pick next year. Tyler Harrell, a difference maker at the wide receiver position from a speed perspective, transfer from Louisville, guy that's just a straight burner. So you add those two. You add Jahmyr Gibbs, and I do think on the offensive line, this team is going to be better than they were last year just because point blank, they can't be worse. Last year, Doug Marrone was in as the offensive line coach. It was a disaster. All you need to know is that Doug Marrone is not back this year, and you don't leave Alabama as an assistant unless you are leaving for a head coaching job or you're leaving for some sweet upgrade at the assistant coaching level if another coach takes a job. Well, nobody off Alabama's staff got a job last year, head coaching job that I know of, which means that Doug Marrone, Nick Saban found him a nice landing spot so that he could get rid of him without having to fire him. And so I do think coming into this year, we're looking at a situation where that offensive line should be better. By the way, I didn't even mention it, but it is worth noting. This staff is coming back with more continuity than ever before. Nick Saban is used to replacing not only one of his coordinators pretty much every year, but that coordinator getting a big-time head coaching job and taking a bunch of assistants with him. Last year it was Steve Sarkisian going to Texas. 1 year it was Kirby Smart going to Georgia. 1 year it was Lane Kiffin going to FAU, which became Ole Miss, One year it was Mike Loxley leaving. So you go on and on down the list. This is the most staff continuity that they have had in a while. And I would also add, that defense was better than you remember it last year and has a chance to be one of the better Saban defenses of all time. First off, I think we got so caught up in the Georgia mystique last year about their defense. You know who finished in the top 10 nationally in total defense? Alabama. They were awesome all year long against that schedule that they played at A&M, Florida at home, LSU, Arkansas, Ole Miss. They were awesome on defense. They just weren't Georgia. And so now they bring back 8 starters off that team, including Will Anderson. So, I don't even know how to describe his numbers last year. Madden, comic book, whatever you want to call him. But this was a guy that led the nation, 33.5 total tackles for loss, 17.5 sacks, led the nation in both categories. Dallas Turner is back along the defensive line. No doubt they are the best 1-2 punch in terms of pass rushes. Henry To'oTo'o back at linebacker, 100-plus tackles last year. He is projected by Mel Kiper as a first-round pick. And then the defensive backfield is stacked as well. Eli Ricks, a transfer from LSU, added in with all the guys they had last year, including Jordan Battle. Both of those guys I just mentioned, surprise, surprise, first-round picks according to Mel Kiper. And so when I look at this Alabama team, this is the scary, Nick Saban kind of taking the beakers in the lab. Those beakers you used to have in chemistry class. I wasn't smart enough to take chemistry, but I'm saying hypothetically speaking, if I was. Those beakers, you mix this with this and you see what happens? Well, think about this. Alabama's been recruiting at an elite level for many years. They really were so young last year that they didn't lose very much in the NFL draft. Now Nick Saban gets to go in the portal and plug holes with transfers and established players. Ooh, buddy, that is a scary, scary thought. Alabama, by far, I think to me, the absolute favorite in terms of teams to win it all this year. Let's keep it going. Number 2. And what I would say is number 2 is Ohio State. And I'm not breaking any news there. Ohio State number 2 in the coaches poll and the AP poll. And I do think there's kind of this perception that Alabama and Ohio State, and then it's everybody else. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. I think it's Alabama clearly number 1. I do think Ohio State's number 2. And then I think the gap between 2 and 3 is probably bigger than the gap between 1 Alabama and 2 Ohio State. So if you don't like Alabama, good luck rooting against that team this year. I don't see any losses on their regular season schedule. But to get back to Ohio State, listen, there is a lot of reason for optimism. I mean, last year, and we're going to talk about this, with one of the other teams in this group, but Ohio State had a quote-unquote down year last year, 11 wins, go to the Rose Bowl, beat Utah in the Rose Bowl, and now they bring back maybe the number 1 pick in next year's NFL draft, C.J. Stroud at quarterback. I'm not an expert on NFL draft stuff, but people are saying that he has surpassed Bryce Young as the best prospect in college football, and I'm not here to tell you that you're wrong. 44 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, and I think when you talk about college football, when you talk about triplets, that quarterback, running back, wide receiver, I don't know that there's even a doubt that Ohio State has the best, or certainly at least the most established. Now, maybe Alabama gets there with Jahmyr Gibbs and Jermaine Burton along Bryce Young. But in terms of going into the season, C.J. Stroud, 44 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Travion Henderson, the running back last year that as a freshman was kind of messing with all of Maurice Claret's records at Ohio State. Remember how great Maurice Claret was in 2002? Well, Travion Henderson, 1,200 yards, 15 touchdowns. I know it's a different world in Big Ten country, different offenses, but that is incredible. And then Jackson Smith and Jigba. If you listened to my Heisman preview a few days ago on the Aaron Torres pod, you know how I feel about this guy. 95 catches, 1,600 yards, 9 touchdowns. The crazy thing I keep coming back to with Jackson Smith and Jigba, this is a guy that was playing alongside 2 top 15 or so picks in last year's NFL draft, Garrett Wilson, who went to the Jets, Chris Olave, who went to the New Orleans Saints. Those 2 guys, when asked who was the best player in that receiver room, they both did not hesitate saying Jackson Smith and Jigba. And so I look at this team, I just see so much talent on that offensive side of the ball. We saw in the Rose Bowl the young skill position guys are ready to step up. Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Ibuka. But what I would also say about Ohio State, they have maybe one of the biggest question marks out of all these teams that I do think is a contender. And that's what's going to happen with this defense. And I think right now it's kind of cliche to say, Ohio State was really bad on defense last year. Can they turn it around? I think people are missing the point. They've been just okay. I don't think they were really bad last year. But they've been just okay on defense really for 2 years now. Ranked 59th nationally in total offense last year, or total defense last year, 60th the year before. So it is really a 2-year process. Jim Knowles, the coordinator from Oklahoma State, has been brought in to fix this thing. But I'm just not totally sold that this defense flips overnight for Ohio State. Now, they certainly have the talent. They've recruited at a high level. Many of their best defensive players were some of their youngest guys last year. Their leading tackler, Ronnie Hickman, is back. Jack Sawyer, 5-star, is back. So they have plenty of talent. I just don't know that you can expect them to go from just average to below average to good enough to actually win a national championship. But I guess that's why you hire the high-profile, well-paid defensive coordinator to figure that out. One other thing worth noting on Ohio State, I'm not comparing the schedule to like the SEC West and Alabama. I do think the schedule is probably a little tougher than people realize. Obviously, you play Michigan coming off a playoff appearance at home, Penn State and Michigan State on the road, also Wisconsin and Iowa at home, and that's on top of Notre Dame in the out-of-conference. So you talk about a bunch of teams that are ranked in the preseason top 25 or coming in with major expectations. Ohio State plays a lot of them this season. Let's keep it going. The 5 teams that I believe can win the national championship this year, and I believe it is only 5. Number 3, maybe you're not surprised. It is the Georgia Bulldogs. How about my dogs? Now, I'm a little bit more down on Georgia coming into the year than most, and it's for the reasons that I've talked about on this show. I think it's easy to just label Stetson Bennett a national championship winning quarterback. I also remember all the way back to, 8 months ago, when everyone was saying during the playoff you had to bench him because he wasn't good enough to beat Alabama. And he was good in that championship game. He wasn't elite, though. He didn't put the team on his back. He was kind of who we thought he was. And the defense made a couple plays, and it's not to discredit Stetson Bennett, but remember, it was a pick 6 that sealed the win for Georgia in that national championship game. So Stetson Bennett is back, and I think he's kind of in that untouchable status where it's going to take a lot for somebody else to get that job from him. And when I say that, what I mean is I'm not saying somebody's going to beat him out in camp. It is his job. But if he really struggles, you're going to give him an extra long leash because of what he did for you last year. Obviously, the defense is replacing a ton of talent as well. Historic draft haul last year. 15 total players drafted on Georgia, both offense and defense. 5 first-rounders. Both of those are records. 5 first-rounders off the defense is a record. But when I look at why Georgia can win it, I think what it comes down to is sort of what I just said, but not really. The bottom line is, no matter what you think about Georgia, how much they lost, is Stetson Bennett the guy, all the questions that I'm asking right now, the bottom line is they still recruit at such a high level that they are going to replace that talent. I don't want to say no problem. I don't think they'll be historically great like last year on defense, but they're going to be really, really, really good. It's funny, I was looking through some stuff on Tuesday before I recorded this segment, and here are the names you need to know on Georgia. This, again, after losing 5 first-round picks last year. Leader, Nolan Smith, former number 1 overall recruit in high school football. So when the baseline to start is Nolan Smith, former number 1 high school player in America. No, I'm not talking about the former Duke basketball player. I'm talking about the Georgia linebacker. When the baseline is that guy, as well as Keely Ringo, who is a projected top 10 pick at corner, and Jalen Carter, a projected first-round pick on the defensive line at linebacker, that's a pretty good starting point. Former number 1 recruit in America, rated ahead of Kayvon Thibodeau, who just went in the top 10, and he was in the news this week for sure. And then Keely Ringo, when I say he's in the news, I'm not making light of his injury, but the conversation about it. Keely Ringo, Jalen Carter, 2 first-round. It's just insane how much the talent is there. And then I think keep in mind a couple other things with Georgia. One, say what you want about Stetson Bennett, including what I just said. Is he really that guy? But he is a national championship winning quarterback, and nothing at this point in his career is going to faze him. The other thing that stands out to me about Georgia, the schedule is just very manageable in terms of what you need to do to make another run. Yes, they open against Oregon, But first of all, we know who Oregon's quarterback is. It's Bo Nix. Good luck with that. The game is in Georgia. First-year head coach, first-time head coach. I know he came from the Georgia staff, Dan Lanning. I'm just not totally sold. Beyond Oregon in the opener, though, what are the toughest games? Well, Tennessee, late in the season, you play them at home. Auburn, late in the season, you play them at home. Kentucky, you do have to go on the road for. But there is no Bama in the regular season. There is no A&M in the regular season. There is no LSU Ole Miss in the regular season. And so, first off, I've shared this stat, I think, once or twice, but since 2017, that first run to the title game where they lost to Tua in Alabama, every season where they have not played Alabama in the regular season, they've won at least 11 games. And so I'm looking at Georgia. I think in a worst-case scenario with the schedule that they have, I just think there's such a big gap between them and everybody else in the SEC. At worst, I think you're looking at going to the SEC title game 11-1, playing Alabama to go to the playoff. Potentially, you're 12-0, and in a scenario where even if you lose, you're in, much like last year. Not saying they're better than last year, but I'm just saying the schedule breaks right, and there is so much talent that I am just not worried about the Georgia Bulldogs. Let's get to number 4 on the list, and I'll say, when it comes to number 4 on this list, it's probably a team that I don't think a lot of other people are as high on as me, and I'm not really sure why. If you've listened to this show or my other shows or whatever, I really like the Oklahoma Sooners coming into this year. Yet you look around, the over-under is basically 9.5. Baylor was picked to win the conference by the media. I don't get it. I don't see it. And I like Oklahoma a lot. And I think part of the reason why I like Oklahoma, I think the narrative on them going into the season is wrong. I think there's this belief that that Lincoln Riley leaves, the offense is going to fall off a cliff. I think there's this belief the defense is terrible because the defense is always terrible. And I think there's a belief that they just lost a lot of talent in the transfer portal. And what I would say to that is when it comes to the offense, I'm not sold it's going to miss a beat. I don't want to say it's not going to miss a beat. I do think it's going to look different. I think it's going to be very explosive, though, because remember who they brought in? Dillon Gabriel, the transfer from UCF. And if you haven't watched a ton of Central Florida games over the last couple of years, what I can tell you about Dillon Gabriel, the kid's phenomenal. And because he was so far off the radar, I don't think people realize just how good this guy was. Last year he was hurt, but the year before, playing for Josh Heupel, who's now the Tennessee head coach, 10 games played because of COVID. It was a shortened season. 32 touchdowns, 3,500 yards passing. Not great at math, but when you're averaging 3.5 touchdown passes per game, 350 yards per game, you know what you're doing. Well, now he's at Oklahoma. He's going to have the best weapons around him that he's ever had. And remember, the Oklahoma offensive coordinator is Jeff Lebby, who came to Oklahoma from Ole Miss, but before Ole Miss, he was at Central Florida. See that little connection there? These two have worked together. Dillon Gabriel's going to an offense he's comfortable with. I think he's going to thrive there. Keep it going. The defense, they stink. They're Oklahoma. Yeah, and they just got maybe the best defensive coordinator in college football, Brent Venables, to run that defense. I don't think they're going to be Georgia last year. I don't think they're going to be number 1 in the country. But if there's ever a time to make a leap, I do think it would be under Brent Venables this coming season. I just think they're going to be significantly better than they've been since, in a very long time. So I think they're going to be just as good on offense. I think they're going to be better on defense. And I will say the portal stuff, listen, I can't lie and say they didn't lose anybody to the portal. Caleb Williams is gone. I don't think the gap between Caleb Williams and Dillon Gabriel is as big as people think. Go ahead and look at Caleb Williams' stats the last 3 games when he played good defenses in the regular season. Oklahoma State, Baylor, and Iowa State. It wasn't that great. And they lost some other pieces, but they brought a lot back too. Best running back, Eric Gray, is back. Leading receiver, Marvin Mims, is back. I like this Oklahoma team a lot. I don't mean to spoil my upcoming college football playoff and national championship picks, but let's just say I like Oklahoma more than most. The final team that I think can win the national championship. These are teams that can win it. Not get there, but win the 2 games needed to win a national championship on top of a regular season, on top of a conference championship game. I don't think it's going to happen. I do think the Clemson Tigers, though. And what's crazy about Clemson, and I have 2 kind of disparating, I don't know what the right word is. You get, two different thoughts on Clemson. On the one hand, they were disappointing last year. Like you can't sugarcoat it. They came in top 5 in the country, did not win their division, did not play for an ACC title, did not go to the college football playoff, didn't even go to a New Year's 6 bowl game. But then I look at it and think about everything that went wrong. DJ Uiagalelei goes from projected Heisman Trophy, maybe not the favorite, but top 2 or 3, to having a negative touchdown to interception ratio, 9 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, with a 56% completion percentage. On top of that, they had all sorts of injuries, like historically bad run with injuries. They lost Will Shipley, their best running back, for several games. They lost Brian Brzee, a first-round NFL draft talent, for several games. And so you start to piece everything together, like everything that went wrong with Clemson. They still went 10-3, and they still won 10 games in a season that all that stuff went bad. And so why I kind of sort of do like Clemson, but I'm not sure that I do, to win the national championship, everything that went wrong. Well, now think about this coming year. One, I don't think it can get any worse with injuries than last year. Beyond that, most of their key players are back. Brian Brzee is back. Miles Murphy, the defensive lineman, I think both of those guys are going to be first-round picks this year. The defense is stacked. And on top of that, you have a real alternative at quarterback to DJ Uiagalelei. If that doesn't work out, Cade Klubnik, 5-star quarterback from the state of Texas, is now at Clemson. And he is going to push DJ. And as I've said many times, Dabo Swinney is saying all the right things about the quarterback race. DJ is our guy. But we have seen that Dabo Swinney is not afraid to pull the trigger if he believes that there is a quarterback on his roster that gives him a better chance to win at the highest level, even if that quarterback is a freshman. I'm not comparing Cade Klubnik to Trevor Lawrence. But Clemson got to the playoff with Kelly Bryant, and Dabo Swinney said, that's not good enough to win me a national championship. The guy that I have backing this guy up is, and he put Trevor Lawrence in week 4, or week 5, I guess it was, as the starter, and Clemson won the title that year. That's what's going to be interesting to me. I don't think Dabo's going to mess around. Trevor Lawrence got snaps early in that season. Trevor Lawrence was named the starter by week 5. I think this is a thing to watch. Is DJ just the guy from day one, no matter what? Or if things start to go a little shaky, does Cade Klubnik get a series here? Does he get a series there? And then all of a sudden you wake up and it's week 6 and Cade Klubnik's your permanent starter. But listen, the talent is there for Clemson. I will say the schedule is much tougher this year than in previous years. I think the ACC across the board is going to be a little bit better. They do play Miami this year. Miami's probably the second best team in that league. Maybe NC State, maybe the second best team in that league. Florida State is improved. And this is kind of crazy. You look at Clemson's schedule. This is wild to me. 4 of their first 5 conference games are on the road. Now, technically, one of them is a pseudo-neutral site game. It's in Atlanta playing Georgia Tech, not in their road venue, not in their home venue. But it's a tough schedule. And so we're going to find out really quick with Clemson. I tend to think if everything breaks right, they're good enough to win a national championship. A couple teams I just don't see it with. Utah, I think Utah's good enough to make the college football playoff. But are they good enough to win it? Are they? They're physical, they're tough, I get all that. Are they going to go on the field and beat Georgia in a semifinal and Alabama in a title game? Ohio State in a semifinal and Alabama in a title game? I just don't know that they have enough to win it. Texas A&M, I've said many times, I think is a year away. Michigan's kind of the same, top 10 team, but last year everything breaks right. They got some older players because of the extra year of eligibility with COVID, win the Big Ten, everything goes their way, still get destroyed by Georgia. Can they go to the college football playoff? They'd have to beat Ohio State to even get there. Can they then go to the playoff, beat Alabama and Clemson in back-to-back games, Clemson and Georgia, whoever those two teams may be? Notre Dame, I'm just a seller. I believe in Marcus Freeman, but really inexperienced at the quarterback position. First-year head coach. The schedule is much tougher. At Clemson, I didn't even mention that Notre Dame, or Clemson at home, didn't even mention that Notre Dame actually plays Clemson this year when I was talking about how tough Clemson's schedule is. They also